Hello and welcome to Effed Up Stories, the podcast series. My name is Will Pender, and joining me is my good friend and co-host Ryan Sharpe. This is our first episode, and we hope to make the show a regular thing. If you haven't been to the website yet, I invite you to check it out at effedupstories.com. We post and host everything on the paranormal to UFOs, conspiracies, and everything in between. And the site thrives on stories by you, the people, so I encourage you to submit. And if you have any questions or anything that you'd like to hear on the show, be sure to send them to either will at effedupstories.com or ryan at effedupstories.com, and we will try to feature it in one of our podcasts. So with that said, Ryan, so I figured we could talk about a couple of the excursions we've had, and that way if there's any differing details, we'll have both sides to throw together.
Well, it'll be definitely interesting to, recount these stories again. It's been a while since we've really gone over the details of what happened.
And things tend to get a little fuzzy after time. And I especially tend to mess up my details. Like I would describe you as a walking dictionary. So, was it an eidetic memory is what they say Sheldon has on The Big Bang Theory?
Yeah, eidetic.
Eidetic. There you go. I fucked that up.
So, I mean, we're talking about. I guess we're going to start off with the old highway.
Yeah, I think that's a good spot to start.
And I mean, this is an event that happened 10 years ago, roundabout.
Isn't that crazy to think that it was 10 years ago?
And that's very true. We're 10 years away from some of the most interesting little incidences we've ever experienced. That I've ever experienced personally.
Me too.
But I feel like I could recall the majority of the details quite well even today.
Yeah, I think I got a good grasp on what happened as well. But like I said, I find you're better for details, number one. And number two, you're going to have a little bit of a different perspective, I guess, anyway. So let's just start off, from the beginning. What is the old highway? Well, I remember back then, I was in a particularly low point in my life, and I just started walking. And, a reason to get out of the house kind of a thing. And I remember, because we used to hang out, and we just started, just aimlessly walking. And we came across this place. It wasn't really far from our house, but, it was an abandoned highway, really. And nobody really went there, at least at the time. Oddly enough, over the years, I think people noticed because everyone started bringing their dogs. It was like populated by dog shit. But but anyway, I digress. We started walking there, and being the weirdos that we are, I remember this particular night. It was like 3 a.m. And can you remember what was so strange about that night? I mean, just thinking about the atmosphere now.
Well, if I remember correctly, it was it was a really really clear night, but it was windy.
Yeah, well, I don't remember the wind per se, but I do remember it was very bright for nighttime, especially 3 a.m. I mean, we're talking about a place that has no street lights. You're kind of out of the city. You're just reaching outside of the city, and it was it wasn't daylight, but I could see a fair bit down the highway. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, and the moon was really bright. And
it was bright enough. I remember that we could still see the faint painted lines on the on the pavement on the old highway.
Oh yeah.
Like you say, it was a really clear night. I remember the wind only because it gusted. It just seemed like there was no clouds. Everything was really still, and then there was just these sudden gusts of wind every now and then. but yeah, the you know the clearness, the how bright everything was. Even coming through the tunnel, I remember when we walked through the tunnel, you're looking. Of course, it's completely black in there, and then you could clearly see that line where you were stepping into. Even 3 o'clock in the morning, it was like you were stepping into a almost twilight.
Yeah, and speaking, going back onto the painted lines you were talking about, that's something that I use when I tell the story because I guess years ago they must have had a triathlon or something like that.
Yeah,
So once the highway starts, because you walk down a ways and there's like these rocks and a gate kind of blocking you off, like from cars going down there. And there's these yellow painted lines all along the road, all the way to the bottom, and their measurements is like it basically does a kilometer. I think for every, was it 250 meters or something, they have as a marking.
yeah. It's all
Or
it was all marked out for races and 100-meter dashes and
yeah.
kilometer runs. Yeah,
Okay, so we get there, and I mean, one of the things that's always drawn us there anyway, well, besides the fact that it's private, there's not a bunch of people everywhere, but it's got a strange feeling there, doesn't it? It's like,
it's
um,
definitely a lonely place. You're right on the edge of the city on a stretch of highway that I used to take quite frequently with my family. That was this abandoned when they put in the new overpass and whatnot. I know in particular as we approached that area, like shortly after we passed the barrier, that there's a particular detail that I think is unique to my perspective on the story because it was something that I wasn't able to get you to see at the time. I
okay.
remember shortly after we passed the barrier, looking up into the sky, and as a avid sky watcher, I took notice of how bright the sky was, and I was looking at what I thought was Mars, and I can't remember exactly what month it was, but I do believe it was it was in the summer months, I believe midsummer, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's one of the more visible times for Mars is when it's in a more I guess a closer orbit to Earth.
You're probably right. I used to know a little bit about astronomy, but I can't remember anything.
Well, regardless, I remember looking up into the sky and seeing this unblinking bright red orb in the sky. And I remember remarking to myself how how bright it was, or how bright Mars was tonight, and but I very quickly realized that there was actually a second orb of light right next to this one, and it was I couldn't reconcile because I know the difference between planets and stars in the sky. I mean, the visual quality of a star, obviously it twinkles, it winks, it strobes. A planet does not. I mean, a planet is a solid, unblinking light in the sky. And
Yeah.
I remember watching, these two lights, and I mean, it very much just looked like a planet. It was unblinking, and I remember, thinking, well, maybe, I'm just seeing things here. I kind of looked away and rubbed my eyes a little bit and looked back up in the sky, but it was, there's still those two lights, and I can remember you were a few feet away, looking off in the opposite direction, more down the highway, where I was looking out, more in a northwesterly direction. Excuse me. And I recall trying to draw your attention to the light, but you couldn't see it. And I mean, at first, I got kind of lost it as well. Though it was bright, there were a lot of stars, and like you said, we were on the very edge of the city, no street lights, and well, for anyone who has seen the night sky out when it's absolutely dark and there are no street lights or other light pollution, there's many, many more stars in the sky than you can see.
Oh,
You
for
know,
sure. Anyone who's gone camping can probably attest to that.
exactly, exactly. So I remember finally spotting the orbs that I was looking at, and I was trying to draw your attention to where they were using a landmark. And I looked back up, and the two lights suddenly blinked together into one.
Okay. I vaguely remember you pointing something out to me. Like I said, I can't remember the details of it. But you've always been a very into the sky. I remember every time we step out for a cigarette or whatever. I kind of do the same thing, but I'm just not as knowledgeable. you know.
In fact, I'm sitting here now looking out my window, and I can see a wide a chemtrail streaked right across the sky.
Well, that is something that we'll get into a discussion
A
on that, I'm
topic for
sure.
another day.
Yeah.
So the old highway. I mean, at that time, I more or less just dismissed the whole thing as, my eyes playing tricks on me, or whatever the case. Satellites.
Yeah,
More or
like
less just dismissed it as just another curiosity in a curious world.
well, we went there. It's just our regular casual, as fucked up as it might be to be 3 in the morning, but let's face it, we're night owls anyway, right?
Yeah.
So we're walking down this highway, and we're both having a cigarette. Because I remember we had a cigarette very, very quickly, like right up at the top of the highway.
Yep,
Because,
right.
like,
Well, while we were standing there, while I was looking up at the light, and while you were looking out over more in a northeasterly direction, and we were both had a cigarette, and then
yeah, we kind of shot the shit. And, like, the thing to point out about the old highway is that it's on a slant. Like, anybody who knows Newfoundland, I mean, the whole thing is hills. Now, not to say that this was a big hill, but it is on a slant, and if you're standing at the top of the highway, you can't see the bottom because it goes down around a bend. There's a bend in it, and on your right side, if you're walking down, there's a hill, and the hill goes up to the new highway, and on the left, it slopes downwards, and you can actually see out across the bay. I'm right on that, right?
yep, correct.
Okay, so we it's important to establish the fact that we had a cigarette up at the top. It's a kilometer long, the whole thing in one direction, and this is important for later when we get down to where the event happened, because. Well, I'll just say that our cigarettes were long gone. Okay, okay, like they were exposed of. And okay, so yeah, we have our cigarette. We're done. We're walking down the highway, and I don't think we're around the bend yet. And if I'm correct, the bend may be what, the halfway point, maybe a little farther.
I would say about three quarters to the end of the stretch of highway. There's a definite bend or an elbow in the and it curves to the left.
Yeah. Okay. So let's jump right to the strange part. So here we are. I mean, you see this thing like the blinking and combining of a light in the sky.
And I
And
mean, I also have to bring up that, particularly that night, I remember that as soon as we started our journey down, after we had passed the barrier, and we began journeying down, I can remember how Well, I personally felt almost like this a sense of oppression, like the air was denser the further we were going. It was like a
Yeah, yeah.
blanket, and I can remember, I was kind of mulling over this feeling when, you just out of nowhere just said to me, like, do you does it feel weird down here, or something to that effect? And I remember we both, had made comment on the strange feeling in the air.
Yeah, because like usually you dismiss it because okay, you're rationalizing. Okay, I'm down in the dark, 3 o'clock in the morning in the middle of nowhere,
Yeah.
you know. But I mean, like we said earlier, this there's something to this place. I don't know what it is. And maybe it sounds strange to say. There's nothing you can really prove, but if you're there, you feel it, right? And on this particular night, yeah, it was like you were descending into uh, a sense of oppression or almost a threatening feeling.
And in particular, I noticed that shortly after, we begin walking down, you know, there was no more wind. It was like everything was still.
Yeah, well, and you know what? Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Like when I said there was no wind, because I remember when we were. The reason why it's so important to me is because I remember really paying attention to that detail when the first event happened. And let's just jump right to it. We were, I would say, nearing the bend in the road when it was like it was like a ball of sparks came scraping down the highway right past us and around the bend. At least it looked like to me. And the first thing that I tried to rationalize it was that, hey, that was one of our cigarette butts from earlier. The wind pushing that and scraping along the road. But the way I remember it is that it looked as if it wasn't even, it almost looked like whatever it was pressed against the road for its entirety. It was like just an orange ball of sparks just shooting out of this thing, and it going around the bend the way I remember it. I think of it as number one, how is that possible? No, like what are the odds the wind could do that? Number two, I don't remember there being any wind, and number three, the fact that it was so long ago that we had our, like, I mean, how could it, if it was one of the cigarette butts, how is it possible that it could have come that far and stayed on course, right? I mean, that was the really strange thing to me.
Well, I mean, it would have had to have bounced all the way, a kilometer down a twisty turny highway.
And still be lit, right? Still be lit. And like, I mean, maybe I forgot to throw it down a step on it. I don't know. But, I mean, that was a while ago. I just don't, and I mean, me, the way I am, I usually flick them off somewhere. I remember, I just don't see how it would have been possible.
Well, I mean, and from my end, I can remember us. We were walking. We were nearing. Of course, the further down you went, the less sky there was available because you were so close to this hill, and it
Yeah.
seemed like it got darker and darker the further down you went, and as we were nearing the turn, there really isn't that much highway left. I can remember we were kind of slowing down a little bit, almost as if we were unsure if we really really wanted to go and walk right down to the end of the highway, right down into the woods. Because though there's a cell phone tower down there today, I mean, there
There
was
wasn't
nothing.
at
There
the
was no
time.
sign of fucking human civilization anywhere other than the fact that there was this lonely stretch of highway. And so, I remember we were getting right down. We were right down just before where the bend goes all the way around. And at first I heard this hissing sound. I remember that first, and I was standing there and I was thinking, it almost sounded like a paper bag or a plastic bag being blown along the pavement, and I'm standing there listening. I mean, anyone who knows me will attest that my sense of hearing isn't the greatest. But when you're standing there in the dark, 3 o'clock in the morning, you kind of turn on your senses a little bit. And I remember straining, listening to the sound, and trying. My mind was desperately searching for a solution for it. Because there's no snakes, there's nothing like that. Uh, um, and this hissing sound, and then and my peripheral vision, however, unlike my hearing, is magnificent. And I caught this object. I remember it was just this ball of, exactly how you described it. It was like a ball of orange light, like the maybe the size of a fist or larger. This streaked by on my left, and I can remember like sidestepping, and my adrenaline immediately skyrocketed. And as this thing went by, I realized that the hiss was coming from it. And I mean, to me, it seemed at times like it was slightly above the ground, and then other times like it was touching the ground. And the whole time it was like you said, there was like small sparks shooting out from it. And to me, it almost seemed like it bobbed and wavered and maybe hovered and bounced down this highway. And then, like you said, it seemed to it just it was going completely straight, and then suddenly it veers off to the right, uh, into the trees just before the bend in the highway.
And that's probably where I got my details. Like from my perspective, it looked like it went around the bend, but it obviously like different angles, so you see it go off and it goes in, but it's still curved though,
Well, all I can
right?
remember at the time, I mean, it's almost like, if you've ever been startled so suddenly that you've literally seen red, like the edges of your vision are blurred red for whatever reason. I mean, I've personally had that happen. Um, and the event was so strange and out of place and unexpected. I mean, we're going for a walk down a highway we've been down many times. Yeah, it's late at night, but it's a small town, and we know it like the back of our hands, and relatively comfortable. And then suddenly there's a ball of light streak. It's definitely going to throw off your perception of things. But in my estimation, it veered off of the highway into the trees before it made it around the bend. But I mean, anything's possible. I just remember that as we stood there in stark disbelief, we're staring down, and I mean, at first we made a few like half-hearted steps back up the highway with this, just completely unsure as what had just transpired. And then I can remember looking down at the highway and opening my cell phone and like searching frantically for like burn marks or residue or anything. Um,
And yet there, not only was there nothing there, I remember we kind of had a back and forth about this whole thing for at least a couple minutes, because and like I said, the only thing I could rationalize it to be would have been like a cigarette butt. But still, I don't think it's possible. It's just there's nothing else,
I
right?
believe we were arguing that point and trying to, as rational, intelligent people, trying to find a way to reconcile what it was, and coming up short with anything other than, well, perhaps, a miraculous cigarette.
An intelligent one. One got it by an
One
intelligence.
guided by an intelligence. And I believe it was around that time that we seen the red light hovering in the trees.
Yeah, well, in my memory, it was right after that because as we were getting around the bend, because like I remember as you're getting across the bend, because there's trees or bushes, going up the side of that hill on the right that I mentioned, and as we're coming through there, as like because you could see the sky kind of breaking through between the cracks in the branches and stuff like that, and here was this, as we were going to, I seen, we both seen the red light kind of just hovering there in the distance, and I mean.
What would you estimate it at? Because I put it at like anywhere between like 10 and 15 feet off of the ground.
Well, see, I'm bad with that kind of measurement off the top of my head, but the way I describe it is we're on the highway on a slant, and I know that in the background there's a mountain, right? And I know that this light was, I would say, between where the new highway would have been, or no, not the new highway. What am I talking about? It's higher than that. It was halfway up that mountain, as far as I remember. From our perspective angle,
Yeah.
which means that it wasn't resting on something. I guess is what I'm getting at. It couldn't. It's not possible that it was a tail light from a car stopped on a highway or something like that. In fact, I don't even think that because like while the new highway kind of bends around, there's trees and mountains and stuff like that there. I don't even think it would have been possible to see it anyway.
No, you can't see any of the lights. And in fact, the only thing you'd be able to see on that side would have been a headlight, because that's the side of the oncoming traffic.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, the way I recall it was that the light was it appeared to be at our level on but it was behind the trees on the other side of where the old highway curved around to the right. And I remember watching it almost mesmerized as it seemed to bob and jostle through the trees. And actually it instantly brought to my mind a story my father had told me about my grandfather.
Well, Ryan, I'm actually going to get you to hold that thought because we're going to take a quick break here. While we're on our break, I'm going to play for you people Half-Bred Biped by Door to Anima. And if you haven't made the connection yet, that is me. If you're wondering why I'm advertising myself on my own show, the answer is for all the obvious reasons you can probably think of. So enjoy that, and we'll be back shortly to continue our story. I saw an angel fall from the sky one day. I found her wishbone and I broke it away. sun will burn you. Stay at arm's length, brother. Believe you can get away. I'll tell you everything you want to hear. And I'll make you worship a fallacy. And when you finally open up and let me in, I'll eat your heart like a cannibal. So long, little child. The world's full of wicked. You should have learned to play. Mother of all illusions. Humans are exceptions to the jungle way. Like a cannibal animal, we keep feeding and feeding and bleeding our race. More animal than human. Believe in your fellow man and give a helping hand. Give up all your rights because you trust in the man. Listen to their lullaby and finally save the sea. If the world is the devil's and the angels are the sheep, I'm a bipedal cannibal animal. So again, that was Half-Bred Biped by Door to Anima, aka me. If you wish to hear more, you can stream the whole album and a whole bunch more at my artist site, doortoanima.com. That's DOORTOANIMA.com. And of course, the song and all of my other stuff is available on iTunes and a bunch of other online retailers. And with that having been said, Ryan, you were telling us a story about a story that your dad told you.
Actually, my great grandfather, who was out cutting wood in the forest behind his house. Now, I mean, it's all been clear cut and there's homes and everything there. And it was in the winter months, and a storm blew up and he got lost in the woods. And a light. Now, it was never described to me what color this light was, but a light. He spotted a light through the trees and followed it all the way back, right into his backyard. And I mean, he was, from his description of it, while I'm getting it, of course, third hand from my father. The light, or the storm, he couldn't see more than 15, 20 feet in front of him. And, he was lost for hours in the woods and just was guided right back into his backyard again by this light. And I mean, that's immediately what came to mind. I guess the legend of the will-o'-wisp.
The only difference being that I guess in your father's case, it was a helpful thing, whereas the one we're dealing with feels like a threatening.
Well, and I mean, that was definitely the sense that we both got. I mean, my immediate reaction was to turn away and flee. And I mean, I don't consider myself a coward, and I consider myself somewhat a student of the strange and the bizarre, and typically relish the opportunity to observe something strange.
Yeah, well, usually we do explore and we poke and prod. This was one of those rare cases where the sense of dread was great enough that we actually turned around. We didn't even finish our walk down to the end, and that's where it gets more interesting, because as we started walking back, it's almost as if this thing is following us, and
Well, as
that's
you know, of course, as you continue back up, um, that gradual curve, the degrees begin to add up, and you have more and more of trees between us and where we saw this light, and so I believe we were a little more than halfway back up when we stopped and turned around and looked back down, and we spotted the light again, which would had to have meant that it had moved. We would not have been able to see it. I mean, you basically we were looking through a solid earth, and in thick trees at that point to see this thing.
and another detail too to mention is that it's not just a feeling of dread or whatever that this thing brought, but more so that it was intelligent and watching you. Right? I mean, it wasn't just something. It was like as if you were being watched. And I remember, yeah, it was like, we were, so as you said, we were halfway back from where we were, so we're about a quarter ways back to where the highway started. And that's when I remember, because at the time, was it theistic Satanist? You were at I can't remember the term.
Well, the I guess the term that they used was traditional Satanism or theistic Satanism.
Okay, so because I remember at that point, and this part I find would be better. You have to tell this part because I'm just a bystander. But I remember because you were into this and you were you had faith in it, and I remember you sitting down as in a meditative state, and you did. Well, I'm not going to say what you did because I don't know what it is, but
Well,
more.
I remember what you're talking about, and yeah, I mean at the time, I become very interested in this form of meditation and worship, that called itself theistic Satanism, but pretty much used techniques from dozens and dozens of different belief systems and traditions. Um, and at the time, I felt confident enough, once we were so far away, to kind of sit there and kind of meditate and try to visualize a wall of light, and I can remember feeling that this, I didn't want this intelligence or whatever this was following us any further, and I was determined to sit there and to create a thought form of, if you will, of this wall of light, and I mean I had no it's not that I invoked a specific tradition or ritual or specific meditation. It was more just a visualization meditation. And yeah, I had been meditating for pretty seriously for several years, in addition to my belief system. Um, However, this was definitely a completely personal visualization meditation where I was just attempting to put up some sort of barrier or some sort of, I didn't know how to react, or interact with something like this, and that's what at the time what I felt was would be
Was
the the most beneficial thing for me to do.
And you see that was, from my perspective, it's something that made it was a little bit freaky to me. Not that what you were doing, but the fact that you felt the need to do it. Because like to me, yeah, I was pretty spooked by this thing, and but you're looking at your company, and if your company's not freaked out, you're being silly in your head, right? And the fact that you were taking it so serious just made me think all the more that, yeah, it's not just me, it's something pretty messed up. I mean, and there's always a little bit of a fear of this stuff following you. Like if you've ever watched anything on hauntings and stuff like that, and they say, oh yeah, my house is haunted or whatever, you come to discover that it's not always the house, it's the people. You can move after that, man. They're latched onto you. So there's always a fear that like you're gonna attach something to yourself in these situations, and then you're stuck, right? And can you imagine if that happened here? Who the hell would we go to in this small city, right? It's like, fuck, man. We don't even have regular popular stores here. We don't even have an Olive Garden. So let alone someone who's like
A paranormal investigator.
Yeah, like it just doesn't exist, right? Which is funny because, it's, for those of you listening, we're from Newfoundland, okay? The small little fucking island that nobody's ever heard of, in the middle of nowhere. But oddly enough, there is a lot of stories and myths and stuff like that here. You'll actually hear from, mostly you'll hear it like from people, but there was a book by some guy. I can't remember now. Sarah, your wife, mentioned it, and Brittany actually, I think the title of the book is Wonderful Strange, or something like that. I can't remember the author though, but
Yeah, that's correct.
yeah, and so this guy, obviously he did a lot of research and he talked to a lot of people, and there's a lot of stories that originate from here. So and in particular, actually, this isn't from the book, but I've heard a lot of things from the tiny city of Stephenville, and that's like what, a hour, I think it's a 3-hour drive from where I'm to, and I've had some experiences out there myself, and I believe you lived out there before as well.
Well, I was actually born in Stephenville.
Well, there you go.
Um, you know, Newfoundland has a extremely rich history in some of the older mythologies, in the way that a lot of people talk about ghosts and even to an extent evil spirits, what some people call demons. You get that on the ghost shows, but what you don't hear a lot of stories of are like little people and fairies and the hag phenomenon. Even though the hag phenomenon, or I guess what some circles refer to as sleep paralysis, has become more popular. The particular part of that whole I guess that whole spectrum of experiences that are referred to as the hag, I know also has a very rich history of victims in Newfoundland as well.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I was mentioning to Brittany just the other day. That's my wife. That we were going to be doing the show, and I asked her because this whole show kind of thrives on everybody else's story, and I was asking her, do you know anybody that has some kind of odd story? And she said, a lot of people at work. And of course she works at the hospital, so of course you would probably, what worse place could there be for like misery, right? But the hag story in particular is something that is very popular there. I've actually experienced sleep paralysis a couple of times in my life, not a lot, but one time in particular, I told you about that strange dream where my teacher died, Mrs. Pereiras. That's on our site too. I'm not going to go into it now, but it's definitely a strange thing. It's like you wake up, it's like you're totally aware, but you can't move. You're stuck there. And I don't know. Actually, talking about that, let's talk about outer body experiences just for a minute, because I remember that's something that we both had experimented with, and me in particular, I just want to talk about the sensation of, well, essentially you're trying to you're trying to get your body to fall asleep while your consciousness stays awake, and I've done that. I've gotten so far, like to the point where you're trying to get I guess your spiritual body out of your physical body.
I believe they call that state hypnagogic or hypnopompic. There's one where you're asleep waking up, or you're awake going to sleep.
Okay, well, I could never actually get out because I find the sensation. Once I get there, the sensation is so strong and so alien to me that it puts my adrenaline through the roof. My heart beats out of my chest, and it more or less distracts me. Like I just can't keep focused. But I guess the point I was getting at is that after that happens, and I more or less get up, it's like my body's in a stupor because my body was asleep. I'm almost staggered, and it's a very, very weird sensation. And that's all I really want to talk about. With that,
Well,
um,
it's an interesting point that you make, because it really, even amongst people who claim to have astrally projected, and I mean, I will admit that astral projection has always been a extremely fascinating field for me. I've spent the better part of 5 years trying to astral project. I mean, it's been probably that long since I've tried, but I spent about 5 years learning different techniques and reading different books and manuals, and scouring the internet and libraries for everything and anything on astral projection. And I personally, I only ever feel that I came close once. But even amongst all these experts, there's no consensus on, is it your spirit leaving your body? Is it simply your perceptions being extended beyond yourself so completely that you have the sensation that you've left your body? Is it that perceptive sensor that, if you ask a person, where are you, they typically point somewhere behind their eyes. That's where they feel that they as a individual exist.
well, that's kind of a funny point that well, basically you're pointing at the brain, right?
Yes, yes, but in
And
particular, it's the area kind of above and behind the eyes,
so
in
are
the
we talking about
center,
the
in
pineal?
the very center. Well, I guess technically at the I believe the absolute center of your brain is where your pineal gland is exists, um, which is interesting because it's simply a sack of saline solution and electromagnetic impulses.
Yeah, well, that part of the brain, in particular, is always mentioned when we talk about. Well, actually, a lot of people refer to it as the third eye. You're opening your third eye.
Do you know
Um,
that in reptiles, it's actually expressed physically as a vestigial third eye?
really?
Yep. In reptilian embryos, you are able to see you've ever seen an embryo of a fish. You can see the black eyes through the sac. And in the embryo of reptiles, and there are certain reptiles that are more prevalent than others.
Yeah.
One species, in fact, is the last of a line of reptiles that died out during the time of the dinosaurs, and have recently been found to be the fastest molecularly evolving creature on the planet. They haven't changed in 65 million years, but their DNA mutates faster than any other species on this planet. However, as far as we can tell, they haven't changed one like physically in 65 million years.
Well, that's an interesting thing. Now, talking about changing of DNA and evolution. There's this whole idea that, well, actually, I'm not going to get into it too deep because I feel like that'll go on too long. But we know that right now we're about to our solar system is about to go through an area of space full of radiation, and it's basically a time like we don't know of any human civilizations that's been alive while this cycle has happened. Am I right? Like, is this the
Yep,
uh,
there's no we have not experienced this particular cycle in recorded human history.
and basically nobody really knows what's going to happen. And perhaps this is where evolution. I mean, we're talking about radiation, right? Stuff that can affect your DNA. Um,
Well,
so
as
there's
far as
the
we know, as far as I know, NASA has referred to this region because I mean we have been in this region for a while because we're talking about the event known as crossing the galactic equator, and it's not like if you have a border on a map, right? Well, that pencil thin line on a map could actually translate into a quarter mile in real world of what we would refer to as no man's land. Now, the galactic equator, thinking of it as a line, it's probably who knows, 93 million miles wide,
okay.
something like that. So we've been in this for a while, and our furthest orbiting satellites, because some of our satellites actually orbit at a extreme distance from Earth, and some of our I'm sure NASA has a whole array of satellites that are out there doing all kinds of things.
That we don't even know about.
Well, and then some. And our furthest ones out started picking up this radiation first, and it's what they describe it, if I remember correctly, as being it's gamma radiation, except it's gamma radiation that the particles are extremely excited. They're
Yep.
very highly charged gamma particles, and they're as we move further into the galactic equator, we get into areas of higher concentrations of gamma radiation, and the particles are more excited. They're even more energetic. So what we're looking at ultimately is a bombardment of by radiation that we have never as a species have ever had to deal with. We have no idea of its effect on the environment, of its effect on our planet's magnetic field, or it's an unprecedented event. And I mean, in fact, it's so unprecedented that it prompted NASA and National Geographic to team up, and they they set out to scan our entire magnetosphere. And the result of that being, they discovered that our magnetosphere actually
Has a
has this,
huge hole
yeah,
in
a
it.
giant hole in it.
And the reason why I bring this up is because now I'm kind of curious for anybody listening out there, because this is something that we've talked about back and forth now for a couple of months, because I've been seeing it from multiple people that I know, people that I would never ever expect, and I'm not going to mention their names or anything like that, but um, you know. I'll just state this, okay? My brain is a little bit unbalanced. I have anxiety issues and shit like that. I'm used to that kind of a thing. But what I am surprised about is hearing from people that I knew that I've never ever expect to have issues, who've never had issues of depression or anxiety or anything like that, or like especially like even more extreme cases. And and these people might not be people that I've spoken to in years, but you hear stuff, right? It all kind of comes back. And I've heard of all these kinds of people, like all of a sudden, like this year, having these huge episodes, like all of a sudden, extreme depression, extreme anxiety, and to the point where, like, I mean, two of the people I knew, one of which I hung out with, I knew them very well, died in the past 2 years. One in 1 year and one the next, and this speaking from now, and it totally blew me away. So we're not even talking about like, yeah, I heard this guy had a mental breakdown. We're talking about hugely fucked, like ass backwards, like all of a sudden, extreme cases, and that's just people I know. So I'm wondering, and that's just two I mentioned, but there's more. I'm just wondering, is this a common thing? Is this tied to the fact that we're going through this? Is this the effect of the radiation that we're going through right now?
Well, I mean, that's a very interesting point that you make, and I mean, as you know, I'm currently going through some similar things with people close to me. In fact, my good friend is about to head in for mental treatment next week into a facility for perhaps the next several months, and this is an individual who in all senses of the word, I always considered to be a mentally stable individual who now suddenly is on a relatively high dose of antipsychotic medication, and has been diagnosed with psychotic dementia.
Yeah,
Now, you mentioned the radiation, and I guess this really
there's more of the magnetosphere.
well. I mean, what are we looking at here? What are our possibilities? And I think that the current events, and I mean anybody who's been really watching and listening to what's going on out there since the end of 2011, there's been a series of very loud trumpeting sounds that have been heard all over the world, from Kiev, Russia, to Alberta, Canada, to Saskatchewan, Brazil, Spain, all over the world.
I've actually just read something like that myself in Yahoo News.
Well, these sounds are nobody knows what they are. There's been several attempts to explain them as ELF sounds that are just being transmitted from some sort of radiation from out in space. Now, I mean, that was the most scientific explanation that any expert gave. I mean, let's just examine that example for a second. If we are dealing with some ELF phenomenon, obviously this is a new thing. This is not a phenomenon that happens all the time. If this is radiation that is causing our electromagnetic field, our magnetosphere, to vibrate in a strange way, to create a resonance to the point where we actually hear a sound. And from the reports, these people physically feel the vibration of this sound. And it is an ELF, which is an acronym for extra low frequencies. Um, while we need look no further than the test that the Russians did against the Americans' embassy in Russia, where they set up ELF transmitters, tuned them into certain frequencies that their research had indicated would cause depression and anxiety and hallucinations in
Oh,
people.
that's right. That's like the not just the Russians, but the military in general have been.
Well, the
Uh,
Russians started it, and now, as far as I know, 2004, the Navy had a massive symposium on this technology, ELF technology, in which in the symposium they referred to it as the next step in military technology, as the next major phase of in military technology. And I mean, it was a closed symposium. However, the itinerary for the symposium, I don't know, was smuggled out, or a copy of it was made available to the public. And you know, you could see just from the itinerary the focus on ELF research and ELF technology. And very specifically in the itinerary itself, there was a title of one of the presentations, I guess, which was, pretty much ELF technology, the next generation of military hardware. You know, so obviously, even back then there was a extreme interest in this technology. So perhaps we are looking at the results of that, tests that are being done, or maybe the research was just a coincidence.
well, I think one of the main points here, I mean, how this ties in to the magnetosphere is that we're talking about that we know that magnetic frequencies can alter our moods. Basically, I mean, that's what we're talking
Oh, it's
about,
been
right?
proven beyond a reason of a doubt.
Exactly. So now we're heading through space in radiation that has affected the magnetosphere, and we're saying that people have had. We're saying that people have changed mentally. They've had changes in moods and getting mental problems, and I'm wondering if this is a widespread thing, or if it's just coincidences. People I know, but I mean, you got all these factors you got to factor in, which is why I'm curious, right? But anyway, it seems that we have run out of time. And so I would ask you people that if you have any stories, weird pictures, videos, or questions that you'd like us to answer on the podcast, certainly send them in. You can find our submission guidelines and policies and stuff like that at our website, and that's effedupstories.com. EFFEDUPSTORIES.com. Thank you for joining, and I hope you'll tune in next time.